20 Curiosities about the life and legacy of Nicolás Maduro. Nicolás Maduro, born Nicolás Maduro Moros on November 23, 1962 in Caracas, Venezuela, has led a controversial life both politically and personally. Maduro's early life is shrouded in mystery and speculation, particularly concerning his birthplace. While officially recorded as Caracas, some have claimed he was born in Colombia. This discrepancy has fueled various conspiracy theories about his origins, adding a layer of intrigue to his political rise. Maduro's journey into politics began in the 1980s as a bus driver for the Caracas Metrobus system, where he became involved in trade union activities. His political career took off when he joined the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, PSUV, and his connections with the influential Hugo Chavez, then a rising political star, significantly shaped his trajectory. Before ascending to the presidency, Maduro held several key positions within the Venezuelan government. He first entered the national spotlight as a member of the National Assembly in 2000. His loyalty and strong support for Chavez's policies earned him the position of Minister of Foreign Affairs in 2006, where he played a crucial role in shaping Venezuela's foreign policy and forging relationships with other socialist governments. In 2012, Maduro was appointed Vice President of Venezuela by Chavez. This role was pivotal as it positioned him as Chavez's successor in the event of an incapacitating illness. Following Chavez's death on March 5, 2013, Maduro was elected interim president and subsequently won the presidential election held on April 14, 2013, amid accusations of electoral fraud and a highly polarized political climate. Maduro's rise to power was marked by a tumultuous transition period. His presidency began under a cloud of controversy, with ongoing disputes about the legitimacy of his election and allegations of electoral manipulation. His tenure has been characterized by increasing political repression, economic mismanagement, and widespread humanitarian crises, solidifying a legacy that is deeply contested both within Venezuela and on the international stage. In this video, we aim to shed some light on this political figure who has continued the legacy of Hugo Chavez Frias in all the wrong ways. Number 20. Suppressing protests with military force. In 2014, 2017, and 2019, Nicolás Maduro's regime faced massive protests across Venezuela, driven by widespread discontent with economic hardship and political repression. To quell the unrest, Maduro authorized brutal crackdowns each time involving military and police forces. The security personnel deployed rubber bullets, tear gas, and live ammunition against demonstrators, leading to numerous deaths and injuries. Human rights organizations reported widespread abuses, including arbitrary arrests and torture. The regime's tactics aimed to intimidate and silence dissent, consolidating Maduro's power but further alienating the Venezuelan populace and drawing international condemnation. Each time, the violent suppression marked a turning point in Venezuela's descent into authoritarianism, with the government's heavy-handed approach exacerbating the country's political and social crises. Number 19. Political imprisonments, 2014 to the present. From 2014 to 2021, Nicolás Maduro's administration systematically targeted opposition leaders and activists, using imprisonment as a tool to suppress political dissent. Prominent figures including Leopoldo López, Raúl Baduel, and Antonio Ledesma faced arrest under dubious charges, often involving fabricated evidence or political motivations. The regime's crackdown extended to grassroots activists and political parties, stifling organized resistance and consolidating Maduro's grip on power. Imprisoned critics endured harsh conditions, including inadequate medical care and solitary confinement, reflecting the regime's disregard for human rights. The political imprisonments not only silenced key voices, but also created an atmosphere of fear and repression, further eroding democratic norms in Venezuela. Number 18. Economic mismanagement leading to hyperinflation, 2015 to the present. Since 2015, Nicolás Maduro's economic policies have precipitated one of the most severe hyperinflation crises in modern history. Mismanagement of Venezuela's oil-dependent economy, coupled with rampant corruption and inadequate fiscal policies, led to skyrocketing inflation rates. The value of the Venezuelan bolivar plummeted, erasing savings and drastically reducing purchasing power. Essential goods became prohibitively expensive or unavailable, causing widespread economic hardship. The hyperinflation crisis contributed to severe social unrest, exacerbating poverty and leading to a humanitarian emergency. Maduro's failure to address the economic crisis effectively has been a key factor in Venezuela's ongoing instability and suffering. Number 17. Food and medicine shortages, 2016 to the present. Under Nicolás Maduro, Venezuela has experienced severe shortages of food and medicine, largely due to poor governance and systemic corruption. By 2016, the economic collapse and mismanagement of resources led to widespread scarcity of basic necessities. Supermarkets and pharmacies struggled to stock essential goods, while black markets flourished as desperate citizens sought out items at exorbitant prices. The shortages have had devastating effects on public health, with hospitals facing critical shortages of medications and medical supplies. Malnutrition rates soared, and preventable diseases became rampant. The crisis underscores the regime's inability or unwillingness to address the dire needs of its population, contributing to the overall humanitarian disaster. Number 16. Erosion of democratic institutions, 2016 to the present. In 2016, Nicolás Maduro's government undertook a drastic move to undermine Venezuela's democratic institutions by dissolving the National Assembly's powers. In response to increasing opposition, Maduro created a constituent assembly, handpicked to be loyal to him, which effectively stripped the National Assembly of its authority. This move was widely condemned both domestically and internationally as an attempt to consolidate power and sideline democratic checks and balances. The new assembly enacted laws and made decisions that further entrenched Maduro's control, undermining the principles of democratic governance and exacerbating the political crisis in Venezuela. This erosion of institutional integrity contributed to a deeper political and social divide in the country. Number 15. Rigged elections, 2018. The 2018 Venezuelan presidential election, in which Nicolás Maduro claimed victory, was marred by widespread allegations of fraud and irregularities. The election was characterized by accusations of vote tampering, lack of transparency, and manipulation of electoral processes. International observers, including the European Union and the Organization of American States, condemned the election as neither free nor fair. Reports emerged of voter intimidation, restricted access for opposition candidates, and the use of state resources to sway the outcome in Maduro's favor. The rigged election solidified Maduro's grip on power but further isolated Venezuela from the international community and fueled internal dissent. Number 14. Human rights violations, 2017 to the present. Since 2017, Nicolás Maduro's regime has been implicated in severe human rights violations, including torture and extrajudicial killings. Security forces have been accused of committing brutal crackdowns on protesters, political dissidents, and ordinary citizens suspected of dissent. Reports from human rights organizations detail systematic abuses such as arbitrary arrests, torture in detention centers, and targeted killings of opposition figures. The regime's tactics reflect a broader pattern of repression aimed at stifling dissent and consolidating power. The pervasive human rights abuses have drawn condemnation from global human rights advocates and further contributed to Venezuela's humanitarian crisis. Number 13. Mass exodus of Venezuelans, 2014 to the present. The political and economic crises in Venezuela under Nicolás Maduro have triggered a mass exodus of Venezuelans seeking refuge abroad. Starting in 2014, escalating economic hardships, political repression, and violence prompted over 4.5 million people to flee the country. Neighboring countries, including the United States, Colombia, Brazil, and other Latin American nations, have been significantly impacted by the influx of Venezuelan refugees. The exodus has created a regional humanitarian crisis, straining resources and infrastructure in host countries. The migration of Venezuelans is a stark indicator of the severe conditions under Maduro's rule and the profound impact of his policies on the lives of ordinary citizens. Number 12. Corruption scandals, 2014 to the present. Nicolás Maduro's presidency has been marred by numerous corruption scandals involving the siphoning off of billions from public funds. Investigations have revealed extensive corruption within his administration, including misappropriation of state resources, embezzlement, and bribery. High-profile cases have implicated members of Maduro's inner circle, such as former Vice President Tarek El Aissami and Oil Minister Rafael Ramirez Carreño, each scandal revealing a pattern of financial mismanagement and abuse of power. The scandals have exacerbated Venezuela's economic collapse, undermining public trust in the government and highlighting the regime's disregard for transparency and accountability. The rampant corruption has further deepened the country's crisis, contributing to widespread poverty and instability. Number 11. Collapse of healthcare system, 2015 to the present. Since 2015, Nicolás Maduro's neglect and mismanagement have led to the near collapse of Venezuela's healthcare system. Chronic shortages of medical supplies, medications, and equipment have left hospitals struggling to provide even basic care. The healthcare infrastructure is severely underfunded and plagued by inefficiencies, leading to deteriorating health services and widespread suffering. Patients face difficulties accessing necessary treatments, and preventable diseases have surged due to lack of medical resources. The collapse of the healthcare system reflects the broader failures of Maduro's administration and its impact on the Venezuelan population's well-being. If you like our work, hit the notification bell so you get informed each time we upload a new video. Number 10. Environmental destruction, 2016 to the present. Under Nicolás Maduro's rule, Venezuela has faced significant environmental degradation due to lax regulation and illegal mining activities. The government's policies have allowed unchecked exploitation of the Amazon rainforest, leading to severe deforestation and pollution. Illegal gold mining operations, often backed by criminal organizations, have contaminated rivers with mercury and destroyed vast tracts of forest. The environmental destruction has had devastating consequences for biodiversity in local communities, contributing to ecological imbalance and further illustrating the regime's disregard for sustainable development and environmental protection. Number 9. Media censorship and crackdowns, 2014 to the present. Nicolás Maduro's regime has aggressively censored media and silenced independent journalism to control the narrative and suppress dissenting voices. Since 2014, the government has shut down critical news outlets, including at least 233 radio stations, while restricting access to numerous online portals and television channels who are critical of his policies. Media censorship includes the confiscation of equipment and intimidation of reporters who criticize the regime, many of whom have to choose to be exiled. This crackdown on press freedom has stifled public discourse, preventing Venezuelans from accessing unbiased information and contributing to the regime's ability to maintain a stranglehold on power while the true extent of the country's crisis remains obscured. Number 8. Crushing free speech, 2017 to the present. Since 2017, Nicolás Maduro's administration has ruthlessly targeted and silenced critics, using threats and violence to suppress free speech. The regime has enacted restrictive laws and utilized security forces to intimidate journalists, activists, and ordinary citizens who express dissenting views. Arbitrary arrests, physical attacks, and forced disappearances have been reported as tools to stifle criticism and enforce conformity. The suppression of free speech has created an atmosphere of fear and repression, undermining democratic principles and leaving Venezuelans with little recourse to challenge the government's policies and actions. Number 7. State-sponsored violence, 2014 to the present. Nicolás Maduro's government has employed state-sponsored violence to enforce its rule, using armed groups known as colectivos to intimidate and attack opponents. These pro-regime militias have been involved in violent confrontations with protesters, opposition members, and ordinary citizens, often operating with impunity. The colectivos are used as a tool to maintain control and suppress dissent, employing tactics such as beatings, shootings, and property destruction. The use of state-sponsored violence has further entrenched Maduro's power while contributing to the overall climate of fear and instability in Venezuela. Number 6. Electricity blackouts, 2018 to the present. Chronic mismanagement of Venezuela's infrastructure under Nicolás Maduro has led to frequent and prolonged electricity blackouts since 2018. The nation's power grid, neglected and poorly maintained, has been unable to cope with the demands of a crumbling economy and outdated facilities. Blackouts have become a common occurrence, disrupting daily life and exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. The unreliable electricity supply affects essential services, including hospitals and water systems, further highlighting the government's failure to address critical infrastructure needs and the broader impact of the country's ongoing crisis on its citizens. Number 5. Inflated military budget, 2016 to the present. While the Venezuelan population has suffered under economic collapse, Nicolás Maduro has prioritized increasing the military budget to secure the loyalty of the armed forces. Since 2016, substantial funds have been allocated to military spending, including procurement of arms and resources. The inflated military budget is intended to ensure the support of military leaders and maintain political control. However, this allocation of resources contrasts sharply with the severe shortages and poverty experienced by ordinary Venezuelans, as well as the imposing decline on the quality of the health and educative system. This reflects the regime's focus on consolidating power over addressing the country's economic and social needs. Number 4. International isolation, 2015 to the present. Nicolás Maduro's policies have led to Venezuela's increasing international isolation, as numerous countries and international organizations have imposed sanctions and condemned his regime. Since 2015, global reactions to human rights abuses, election fraud, and economic mismanagement have resulted in diplomatic and economic sanctions against Venezuela. The regime's actions have strained relations with traditional allies and diminished Venezuela's standing in the international community. This isolation has further exacerbated the country's economic and humanitarian crises, limiting access to international aid and support and contributing to the ongoing suffering of its citizens. Number 3. Blockade of humanitarian aid, 2019. In 2019, Nicolás Maduro's government engaged in the blockade and obstruction of humanitarian aid efforts to maintain control over the population. Despite severe shortages of food and medicine, the regime blocked and delayed aid deliveries from international organizations and neighboring countries. This tactic was used to exert political pressure and control the distribution of essential resources. Maduro's actions resulted in a continued humanitarian crisis, with aid being used as a bargaining chip rather than addressing the urgent needs of the Venezuelan people. The manipulation of aid highlighted the regime's disregard for humanitarian concerns and further intensified the suffering of its citizens. Number 2. Illegal arrests and disappearances, 2014 to the present. Under Nicolás Maduro, there have been numerous reports of illegal arrests and forced disappearances conducted by state security forces. Since 2014, security personnel have abducted individuals without due process, targeting political dissidents, activists, and ordinary citizens deemed a threat to the regime. These disappearances often involve secret detention centers where individuals are held without formal charges or access to legal representation. The practice of enforced disappearances has become a hallmark of the Maduro administration's repressive tactics, contributing to a climate of fear and impunity and further eroding trust in the government's respect for human rights and the rule of law. Number 1. Decimation of the private sector, 2015 to the present. Nicolás Maduro's policies have led to the decimation of Venezuela's private sector, contributing significantly to the country's economic collapse. Since 2015, government expropriations of private businesses, along with hostile regulatory environments, have stifled entrepreneurial activity and investment. The regime's policies have resulted in widespread business closures, massive layoffs, and economic stagnation. The private sector's decline has exacerbated unemployment and poverty, highlighting the negative impact of government interventions on Venezuela's economic health. The destruction of the private sector reflects the broader failures of Maduro's economic management and the resulting hardship faced by Venezuelan citizens. Nicolás Maduro's second term, which began with his controversial re-election in May 2018, has been marred by allegations of fraud and electoral manipulation. The 2018 election was widely condemned by both domestic and international observers as illegitimate. Reports of vote rigging, coercion, and a lack of credible opposition candidates underscored the erosion of democratic norms in Venezuela. The electoral process, heavily criticized for its lack of transparency, did little to address the mounting concerns over Maduro's increasingly autocratic rule. Despite a brief economic respite in recent years, which some attribute to partial economic reforms and a temporary stabilization of oil prices, the lives of ordinary Venezuelans have not significantly improved. The country continues to grapple with severe shortages of basic necessities, widespread unemployment, and an ongoing humanitarian crisis. The economic situation remains precarious, with hyperinflation and systemic corruption persisting despite temporary alleviations. As Maduro's regime nears the end of its second term, his political future appears uncertain. In the run-up to the 2024 elections, allegations of electoral fraud have resurfaced, with Maduro orchestrating a tailor-made political opposition to ensure his continued dominance. This deliberate effort to undermine genuine democratic competition and consolidate his grip on power hasn't go unnoticed, as his primary political rival, Maria Corina Machado, has garnered hard evidence about the electoral fraud. To this day, the political landscape in Venezuela remains volatile, with widespread discontent and ongoing protests against Maduro's government. Maduro's regime's attempts to stifle dissent and manipulate political outcomes have only intensified the nation's crisis. International pressure and domestic resistance continue to challenge his authority, leaving Venezuela at a crossroads. Maduro's ability to maintain control amid growing opposition and economic instability will likely define his legacy and the future of Venezuelan politics. As the country navigates these turbulent times, the question of whether Maduro can sustain his rule or if a more democratic path will emerge remains unanswered. We are glad you have reached the end of the video. Please subscribe to the channel and leave suggestion about any topic of your choice in the comments. We are a growing channel and we truly appreciate your support. We'll be back real soon with 20 new curious facts about something else.